It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I truly am proud to have a gentleman by the name of Mike Cohn as my friend. Mike is just absolutely amazing. He's a pillar in the Agile community, and he always stays in touch with me, and I appreciate that. So I recently received an email from him, and the topic of discussion this time had to do with Agile leadership and what is an Agile leader. So he starts off, let's start with what Agile leadership looks like. And the first main heading of the topic is Guide, Don't Command. I've got a poster on my wall that shows the Monopoly Man, the mascot of the Monopoly game. I had to look up his name. By the way, in case you were wondering, it's Milburn Pennybags, also known as Rich Uncle Pennybags. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that. In the poster on my wall, Mr. Pennybags proclaims leadership, guide, don't command. I bought the poster for two reasons. One, it's funny to have my rich uncle looking over my shoulder during a Zoom call. And two, the motto actually summarizes Agile leadership pretty well. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a moment and say, so far, so good. I can't believe how much I'm in alignment with 99% of the things that Mike Cohn says. And I know that he's had opportunities where he's talked about topics where he's in alignment with me as well. But let's continue and let's see where this goes, right? Um, so, Agile leaders set out some goals and create culture for people, but they shouldn't tell people what to do. They shouldn't assign specific tasks. They just don't do that, right? Agile leaders will say, let's achieve this goal. But those leaders won't dictate how to achieve that goal. Instead, they create a culture of teamwork, transparency, and continual improvement. Let's stop there. So let's talk about these three, because I definitely agree Agile leaders need to create an ecosystem or a culture where these things are possible. And they shouldn't be dictating how work is done. But sometimes in organizations, the lack of understanding surrounding teamwork or the lack of understanding surrounding transparency, these are the types of things that need to be discussed. So I had one organization. I'm going to describe the nightmare first. Then I'm going to tell you what really stood out about this email that made it right. So the first nightmare I want to talk to you about is the nightmare of teamwork. I know this sounds weird, but here we go. So I had one leader, I'll never forget it. He had a lot of issues on his team with people who weren't doing their job, people who weren't being effective, people who weren't being efficient, people who were failing to deliver things on a timely manner, and people who just were being lazy about what they did. And part of it is they were becoming disconnected from the work. They felt like the organization didn't care. Morale was reaching an all-time low. Things were bad. But instead of telling me all these things, he asked me if I would come in and do an Agile team coaching workshop, which I did. And the focus of this Agile team workshop was teamwork and how we could all work together. And I couldn't help but feel like I walked into Inotech. I don't know if any of you seen the movie Office Space, but I felt like I was walking straight into Office Space, right? Everyone was hating their job. Everyone didn't want to be there. And as I was conducting the training, this guy, this manager, this leader, and I noticed I called him a manager, not a leader. He stood up several times and said, and that means that teamwork means that we will do everything necessary. If that means working 12-hour days, nights and weekends to get the product delivered, because we're a team and there's no I in team, and we'll put in as many hours as it takes and do whatever we have to deliver a product or service, because we're going to be agile, because that's what you've always wanted. And we're going to work 15-hour days, and we're going to have meetings for 8 of those hours, and you're going to be happy about it because we're a team. If you're not cringing right now, that was probably one of the most cringeworthy things I've ever heard. I was just like, are you kidding me? I'm like, you don't even know what teamwork is. You wouldn't know a team if they tackled you. I just, you know, this is the kind of discussion that instigates workplace violence. There, I said it right. Anyone who has that mindset, oh my goodness, it just blew me away. I could not believe what I was hearing. I just thought to myself, I don't even think Mr. Moneybags could say that, right? There's no amount of money that this executive could throw out there as incentive to convince people that that was teamwork. So I guess what I'm trying to say for the first one is true culture of teamwork means that we will support each other and we will uplift each other and we will put in the extra effort when we need to. But it doesn't mean that we are going to create an environment of nightmarish work conditions to fulfill the needs of someone who wasn't sure what the customer really wanted, beat around a bush and made errors. And now we have to go and fix their problem. Their emergency isn't our trigger for teamwork action, right? We need to talk about what teamwork really means and create a culture where people love teamwork and want to work together. Let's talk about transparency for a minute. So I had one with transparency that was a different company. This might sound like the same company, but it was a different company. And they brought me in to do some agile training. And I did some agile training, coaching, and some certification, and I left. About 6 months later, one of the VPs called me back. He says, "Hey, can you come in for a follow up round?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, not a problem." And the first thing he did is he says, "The teams don't need you. I need you." I said, "Okay." So I went into his office and he said, "Now, just to be clear," he says, "you taught the teams about Agile, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And I should have caught the warning here. He says, "You taught the teams about the Agile, right?" I'm like, "Oh boy." He said, "The Agile." I'm like, "Yes, I taught them about Agile." Where's this going? He says, "Good." He says, "Because one of the pillars of Agile is transparency, and I don't think they're being transparent with me." I'm like, "Tell me more." He says, "They won't let me see their Jira." And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm like, okay. I'm like, I don't know what that has to do with the price of tea in China, but all right. He's like, "If they were agile, they would let me see the Jira." I'm like, all right. I said, "So what do we want to do about that? How do we want to address that?" He's like, "I need you to go and get me access immediately so that they can follow this pillar of agile and they can learn what it means. They have to pay and they have to be agile." And I'm like, okay. I said, "I don't know what you're looking for, but if it really means that much to you, I'll get you access to Jira." So I went and got him access to Jira. He was a senior vice president. Literally 30 minutes later, he says, "Lee, I found it. Come see." I said, "All right." So I go to his office and say, "Hey, what did you find?" He says, "I see the problem right here. It says Ritesh worked only 6.2 hours yesterday out of 8. I'm tired of these inefficiencies. You need to go to his desk and ask if he wants to work the 1.8 hours of sick time or vacation time. This is why they didn't want to be transparent." And I'm sitting here like in the twilight zone again, going, "You're kidding, right? You're absolutely kidding." And he wasn't kidding. That was the worst part. So sometimes, in an effort to be transparent, people can weaponize transparency to hold it against you. And I'm not trying to scare you away from being transparent. I'm just saying if we're trying to create a culture of transparency, that we need to make sure that people understand what transparency means and what they're looking at and understand what they're actually seeing before they're taking critical actions that could impale or impact team performance, right? You don't want to cripple the team by leveraging transparency against them. And then the last one Mike brought up was continuous improvement. I'm going to tell you another story about this. So I had an organization where I went and trained, and they were incredibly successful. Oh my goodness! It was one of the pillars. It was one of the organizations that I tell everyone about. It's one of the ones that I'm so proud of. This implementation couldn't have gone any better. They were flying. They were delivering value. The teams were happy. Life was good. And then this executive read a book about continuous improvement and said every sprint he expected them to increase their velocity by 10% because that's what continuous improvement meant. And that they were going to work harder, not smarter, and that they were going to deliver lines of code and that they were going to start documenting things more regularly and that they were going to that these were the pillars of agile. And I'm just sitting here going, oh my goodness, you're unwinding every single thing I did. And yeah, I had to teach this executive the difference between continuous improvement, which is always seeking improvement, even if things are going really well, versus continual improvement, which is making sure we know when a team has reached that optimization mode and letting them roll in a performing state, right? So, with that being said, it's the responsibility of leadership to create an ecosystem and environment where teams are inspired and empowered to achieve great things. I want to say that sentence again because I this is a combo sentence between Mike and I inserted a few words. Here we go. A true agile leader will work day and night to create an ecosystem and environment where teams are inspired, encouraged, and empowered to achieve great things. That is what a leader does. Traditional leaders might also do some of those things, but creating a culture is the last thing that's on their minds. So if you're trying to become an agile leader, start by doing less telling and more inspiring. Set those big, audacious, hairy goals for your teams and create an environment where it's psychological safety and radical candor rule where they can succeed. And if you do, those two things will happen. In 95% of the cases, your team's going to surprise you with the amount of ideas and innovation they can pump through. Because if you can guide the teams instead of commanding them, that's what's going to help you have success in your agile implementation. That's going to do it for today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Mike, once again, hats off. You always put together incredible emails. I hope you don't mind that I added some value there. If you have a topic you want to discuss, feel free to reach out to us. Learn more at agiledad.com. I would love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.